All right, we're going to be talking about, this is one of my favorite subjects, and it's mostly because I think it's something that we all share. So how many people in here are tired of organizations losing our data? Just raise your hand. Okay, so if you look around and you see all those hands raised for a minute, I'm showing you what the ramifications of that have been over time. Because we're going to be talking about C-level responsibility for cybersecurity strategies. In the beginning of time, I want to talk about the conference too. By the way, this has been a great conference. We need to continue to grow this conference. I put a couple of data points up here. I believe in 2021 there were about 20 employees. They were institutional employees. They were trying it out as a proof of concept. Got to be 120 attendees, not just thinking employees, 120 attendees last year. And did we make it over 300 this time? It was really close. Yeah, so we made it over 300. Or we're 300 attendees. I mean, when you see the growth of this, what that tells you is there's a demand for what it is that we talk about and what it is that we do, right? And it's going to be a growing demand. So it's really, and by the way, Josh Tannehill and the Cyber Club, congratulations for seeing the need for this and the focusing on it. Thankfully, I don't have to go over this. That was already covered. I've been in a lot of startups. I think that helps put context around this. So I'm used to starting companies from scratch and being involved in that process. What are we going to cover? We're going to cover from a C-level leadership. And when I say C-level, I'm talking about executive level, whoever is calling the shots for the company, right? I put it as C-level because a couple of examples will show you what I mean. But it's high-level executives who are involved in running the company. What's being a good steward of the business? What's the changing landscape of cyber insurance and how that affects the stewardship of your business? The changing landscape of the both federal and state cyber regulations that are being put out here. And I know this is it sounds boring from this agenda, but it's actually something you need to be paying attention to because it does not apply to, it's going to start touching more and more people, and I'll give you clear examples of that here as we go. And then the lack of urgency that company leaders have as it relates to their side, their company leaders leading to criminal charges. There have been criminal charges filed against owners of companies now, or people who were in charge of making the decision. They have been subject to criminal charges. I'm giving you the references. You can go look it up yourself. You don't have to buy what I'm telling you. There are links. This is going to get posted. There are links in the presentation. You'll be able to go and actually follow up and read about it yourself. So this is about leadership. So in organizations, if you are in an organization or you are a service provider who's trying to talk to organizations about this, there are two things that have to happen before cybersecurity is going to be able to be addressed. One is IT has to be a strategic discussion inside of an organization. It can't be a side effect. It can't be a rounding error. It can't be something that you just think about every now and then. It has to be a strategic discussion. That has to happen before you can make substantive change in an organization. Secondarily, it's got to be, the cybersecurity has to be a strategic discussion because it builds on top of your IT strategic discussion, right? It's cybersecurity strategy is in concert with that IT strategy. And if you don't understand, this is my best line, not understanding IT or cybersecurity is not going to be an excuse anymore. It's not going to be an excuse. If you're a company owner and you say, well, I don't know much about that, that's not going to save you at the end of the day. Especially if you're managing people's financial and personal information. Raising your hand and saying, oh, well, I didn't really know much about IT, it's just not going to cut it. The regulations are moving toward protecting consumers. And as they do that, they're going to place more and more responsibility on the people who run the organization. If you run a business, when you run a business, your accounting and finance group, they all know their subject matter. Why would you hire people for your IT who do not know their business as well as your accounting and finance people understand finance? You would not try to run a company without a solid finance and accounting group. You shouldn't be running a company if you don't have a group of IT individuals who know their subject matter just as well, because the universe we live in now places you in peril if you do not have the right resources available to you. And if you don't have it, raise your hand and get help. There's lots of service providers in Lake Charles and all over the state who can help you understand this, right? The cost of not having an IT strategy is less expensive than having a breach and having to deal with it after the fact. I can promise you that. Even in our little state, because compared to the ego of the other states, the bigger states on the West Coast and places, we're smaller than they are from their perspective, but the cost of not having an IT strategy and a security strategy are the same. You're going to spend $500,000. It really almost doesn't matter what size you are if you're trying to get yourself cleaned up. So the price of that, you can hire a third-party managed security service provider for years for the same price of getting hit seriously once. And I know what you're saying. Well, we're small. Nobody's going to care about us. Well, last week over in Texas, an organization that builds trailers. We know all about this. We're from South Louisiana. They weld trailers up, all the trailers that haul stuff back and forth, whether it's cattle or they just build trailers. 20 employee operation. They just build trailers. They had a social engineering attack and they wired $576,000 to some bad guys. And so now that 20-person trailer company is going to have to recover from the loss of over $500,000. What could they have invested in their cybersecurity, or even the simple understanding that their procedures need to be changed to say, hey, if I'm about to punch a button on anything bigger than $1,000, you need to verbally talk to me as the CEO before that gets gone, right? So understanding what your risk assessments are, what your risks are, is a part of building a security strategy. Cyber incidents are not an if, they're a when. I think everybody here should understand that. The things are going down market, right? The criminals work in managed service there's a managed services group that helps people with hackerware, just like their managed services group that helps the good side of the fence, their managed services group that help the other side of the fence, the dark side, right? So it's easier and easier for people to get into that organization, get into the process of doing that. Cyber insurance, how many organizations here know that they have cyber insurance? So it's about half, right? I mean, you can see that that's about half. That's the statistic. 55% of small businesses have some type of cyber insurance. You have to get cyber insurance. You really do. I don't care how small you are, you need to have cyber insurance. There are going to be 4 things that are going to always be required for your cyber insurance for them to give you coverage. This is going to be the minimum requirements. You got to have multi-factor authentication everywhere. That means not just in a couple places, but the whole organization means it's going to require you to do 2-factor authentication. You need to have your backups encrypted in different places so that they're not on site. By the way, we were doing that 100 years ago when we were backing up on tapes and then putting the tapes in the trunk of our cars and driving them to people's houses, right? I mean, that's how it used to work. Now you can actually encrypt your backups and put them somewhere in the cloud or move them off net. You have to be able to do that. Endpoint detection and response. This is usually the easiest thing for people because we have malware and antivirus on our machines, so this one's usually an easy one to actually accommodate. But this last one, cybersecurity training, what we're talking about there are services out there like KnowBe4 and others where you can subscribe and they will do constant cyber training as an electronic deliverable so that your employees can do it online, and when they have some spare time they can go and be taught what to look for from phishing emails and what not to do and when not to use don't get memory sticks at conferences and just shove them into your machine, because that's a vector that can actually compromise your machine. So these are all things that can be delivered through a cybersecurity program, and these are very inexpensive. These are in the order of $10, $20 a user a month, which if you think about that over the course of an event, if an event happens because someone clicked the link because they didn't have the education to understand what not to click, that's a very cheap thing to put in place. So what's going to get your claim denied? Why go over an insurance thing as part of this? Because it's a leadership thing. This is all about risk for your organization and what's going to cost your organization, what may cost you your organization. If you fill out the forms for cyber insurance and you just check a bunch of boxes without it actually having been executed on, you may get past the application process, but when you have a breach and they come back to verify what actually happened, those claims can be denied. And like I said, you're always in the order of magnitude of $500,000 by the time the dust settles on average. If you don't have preventative measures in place, they're going to deny your claim. If you check the box that says, yes, we do all this, we have antivirus, we have DNS protection, we have multi-factor everywhere. If you just keep checking boxes and say, yeah, we got that. If I squint, we got it. You know what I mean? It looks really close to that. It's not going to matter when you try to collect on your claims. It won't, because they're going to be very black and white about what that is. You need to understand that inability to demonstrate that it's effective, and that you've got effective preventable measures. It doesn't matter if you put things in your network and say that you're protected. You have to actually understand that they're effective. You have to know the difference between that and things that are not effective for protecting yourself. And it's not an excuse to not understand that. Get help. It's just not an excuse. History of prior breaches. If you've been breached before and you get breached again, you're going to get your claim denied. You can almost count on it because they're going to know that you have not taken it seriously and put the preventive measures in place that you need to. Non-compliance with regulations. A lot of companies and organizations are required to comply depending on the types of data they have on site. If you're health related, there's HIPAA. If you're doing e-commerce, then there's also, there's personal private information that relates to payment information, all those things. By the way, the data for your employees is protected data. So if they breach your organization and you make trailers, and what they take is your employees' information, then your employees have had their information put in the wind, and there are times when you can be liable for that if you're not taking the right controls. You don't have the right controls in place. If you don't have an incident response plan. Now, there were really good sessions yesterday, and I think a lot of the presentations are going to be posted, but you should go back and look at it. Ethan did a really good session on incident response. They kind of walked you through considerations and the kinds of things that you come across in an incident response plan. We're used to hurricane plans down here, right? We have hurricane plans, right? So if a hurricane's coming in, we got a set of steps that we take. We know how to put our people off site. We know how to communicate with them. We actually, in a lot of cases, actually have a hard copy of our contact list so that we can get the people. That's what an incident response plan is for the cybersecurity component of your business. It's a plan, a step-by-step plan that allows people to communicate and to know the steps that need to be taken and in what order in order to deal with a cyber incident. You need to, if you don't know how to do that, raise your hand and get some help getting yourself an incident response plan. It doesn't have to be wildly complex. It doesn't. What it has to do is give you a consistent method of approaching incidents if they occur in your organization. And practice makes all the difference in the world. The people who practice their incident response plans, the cost of overcoming an incident is a fraction. It's a fraction of what anybody who does not have an IR plan or has practiced it. Even if you have an IR plan, you haven't practiced it, it's still a fraction. Once you practice that thing, like anything else, once you get some muscle memory about how you're going to tackle these things, the fear and the fatigue that are involved in dealing with that situation are mitigated a great deal, and you're actually much more effective, and you can recover a lot quicker. So an incident response plan, if you don't have an IR plan, your claim's going to get denied in the end. That's just how it's going to work. And if you're in a high-risk industry, you're already going to have a lot of challenges that you're going to have to prove out. Director and officer claims can result in civil liabilities now. So here's the part where you need to pay attention if you are an owner. Now I'm talking about, right this second, I'm talking about public companies, but I'm about to tell you why that being a public company is not the only threat that there is for people who own their business, okay? Last year in 2022, two C-level individuals, one was the Chief Information Security Officer for Uber, had criminal charges placed against him because he basically covered up a breach and didn't tell anybody that data was breached in his organization. He just flat lied and covered it up. And when the Federal Trade Commission found that out, they're not allowed to do that as a public company. They not only did civil charges against the organization, but they did criminal charges against this individual because he basically broke the law in not disclosing what he was supposed to disclose. This is the first time in history that we've ever had a C-level individual criminally charged for a cybersecurity related incident. Pay attention, this is going to be a trend, okay? The second was Drizzly. Now, anybody who knows Drizzly, they actually deliver alcohol. So they were just waiting for something to happen, I'm pretty sure. But anyway, the CEO for Drizzly had been breached in earlier years and had been given what he needed to do to prepare himself to not be breached. And he did nothing about it. He just basically ignored it. He was criminally charged for being negligent, for ignoring the guidance of professionals in that industry about how to harden his organization, because he lost people's information. There is one thing I can tell you, CEO, the buck stops there. It just stops there. And if you're a C-level person and you're in charge of that part of the organization, or you're an executive and you're in charge of that part of the organization, and you make a determination that you're going to ignore the guidance that's been given to you and you're going to play ignorant, you are going to be liable. And more in the future, you're going to be criminally liable at some point, depending on how negligent the action actually was. It could go from everything from a hand slap to you be criminally charged for ignoring these things. And by the way, it should, because I'm tired as hell of people losing our data. I don't want to hear, did I want to hear that our, Motor vehicles, Office of Motor Vehicles lost all of our stuff because they were using the Move It protocol that's been known to be suspect for years. No, that made me angry. I don't know about you guys, but that really made me angry. And I'm sick of people, and the reason that makes me angry is because I know the people who are in charge are ignoring their responsibilities, either through ignorance or just through neglect. One of the two, and neither are an excuse. Let's see, so by the way, the first one was an FTC, again, data breach, he didn't report it. The second was a failure to enact reasonable safeguards. But no worries, right? You're not subject to the FTC, so that's not your problem, right? You're not, Federal Trade Commission, it's not your deal. Well, give me a few minutes here. One thing you really need to evaluate in your organization is your risk tolerance. So you need to determine what your risk assessment results are and think about that. What I mean by risk assessments. What are the key parts of your strategy, or what are the key parts of your organization that you have to operate the company? So that means your servers, that means anything, billing, accounting, whatever it happens to be for your organization. Every company's a production line. There are going to be key elements of that matter. And you need to know what those risk assessments, you get a risk assessment done to tell you what those key components are. Determine what an hour of downtime costs. You'll be amazed when you actually do the math. If you're down for an hour, what's it cost your company? You need to know that number. Because you need to know that number because you're going to need to build an IT strategy and a cybersecurity strategy. Those give you the math to tell you what you should invest in the process. How much time? We're at 5. Okay, good. Liability of losing customers. You got to consider, what's it going to cost you to lose PPI? What are the ramifications of not passing a critical audit? All leadership questions you got to ask yourself. And how bad are the social media difficulties are going to be if you get compromised in front of people? So, who's now subject? There's a new FTC regulation. I've got the link down at the bottom of here. But here are the types of people now that are subject to Federal Trade Commission regulations. Check cashing businesses. Not something you would have thought about before. Check cashing businesses. Payday lenders, car lots, mortgage brokers, non-bank lenders, personal property or real estate people, they are subject to FTC regulations as it relates to the protection of your data. I bet everybody in here's got a relative who's in the real estate business. They're now subject to FTC regulations as it relates to how they treat their data, even if it's in hard copy form. Doesn't make any difference that they're not digital in their copy. They're still responsible for the data now. And there are real problems if you don't take care of it. Personal tax preparers, courier services, credit reporting agencies. Thank God for credit reporting. Equifax losing all of our data a few years ago. That was another one for me. It's like, how does a company that big with that kind of profit margin get off the hook for losing all of our data when you know for a damn fact that they didn't put the right constraints in place to control it? We all know this. We also all know that when you look at the book for that business, that the CEO and the CFO and the CTO are all making millions of dollars a year. They need to be held responsible, right? Anyone who takes applications that contain financial information, you're now subject to FTC regulations. It may not matter until you have it, this is what I'm telling you. So you're not going to see little cars running around with the mattress cops and FTC guys trying to audit you to see if you're following control. That's not what's going to happen. FTC guys are just going to randomly show up at your house or your business. They're not. But when you get breached, you can count on it. They're going to get into your shorts about what you're doing and why you're doing it. And you can face real federal fines for what it is that you're doing as a business. This does not apply to, it does apply to a much broader scope of individuals. I would ask everybody here to follow that link, go look at that FTC regulation to make sure you understand whether or not your business is really subject to that, and start raising Cain if you do not have the controls in place that you should. Okay? So that's all I got. So these are my LinkedIn. You can get in contact with me. We'll have the slides posted. Anybody got any questions? You're way in the back.
Yeah, so you've mentioned what can happen to private businesses for violations. You also talked about like the OMB and how they lost their data.
Yeah.
Are they subject to these things?
No. Congratulations, another voter in Louisiana asking a logical question. How is we as members and citizens of Louisiana who are voting out adults, what do we have as a recourse against the Department of OMB for losing our stuff? The answer is nothing right now. There are no regulations in place to hold them to this, to hold them accountable for it. You're exactly right. When it's a state government or a federal government, they sort of get a pass on this. They're just now getting around to holding the public. At some point, they'll get held accountable because we're going to get tired of them doing it as well. But right now, you're right, there are no regulations as it relates to, no recourse for that particular application. Anybody got anything else? All right, well, thank you very much. I appreciate having a moment of your time.